Before I define a single word, I want to pause. Because what we are about to touch is vast, bigger than my notes, bigger than my life, bigger than all of us. To address the topic, spirituality is a question of integrity. I do not come with a neat answer. I come as one who asks, one who seeks. As I speak, I too am listening, asking Spirit to channel through me what needs to be heard. And I stand in awe. Because at best, we are beginners touching something we cannot fully see. When I was asked to speak on spirituality is a question of integrity, my first thought was, is this a statement, a question, or a challenge? Because depending on how we hear it, the whole conversation shifts. And perhaps that is the point. In English, a question of can mean three things. It can mean a matter of, like spirituality is about integrity at its core. It can mean a test of, like our spirituality will always show whether our integrity is real or not. Or it can mean a challenge too. For example, the more spiritual power you handle, the more your integrity will be stretched and tested. And notice, when we say a question of, there is no yes or no answer. It is not a poll you can take or a slogan you can repeat. It is an issue you have to wrestle with, a test you walk through. Every day your actions answer it, not your mouth. When I say spirituality, I am not talking about membership in a religion or allegiance to a single path. I mean our relationship with the unseen forces that shape life. The breath behind the breath. The current beneath every act. Spirituality is the way we touch and are touched by that which is greater than ourselves. It is what moves between thought and action, between the visible and invisible, between what is born and what cannot die. Some approach it through ritual, some through silence, some through study, some through the rawness of lived experience. But at its core, spirituality is not about belonging to a group. It is about how we stand in relation to the source that animates all things. We are handling fire and wind. Not a poetic figure of speech, but real unseen forces. We touch powers we did not create, powers whose depths we cannot measure. And once triggered, they move far beyond our control. Are we aware of the triggers we set off? Do we know what doors we are opening, what currents we are calling into the world? When I say spirituality, I don't mean religion. I mean the way we touch the unseen source of life. It is like fire and wind, a living power no one can manufacture. We see only the surface, the flames, the breeze, but its depth and origin are beyond our reach. Fire can cook or burn. Wind can carry or destroy. Spirit simply is. Vast, neutral, mysterious. At best, we are only beginners, learning how to hold it safely. What we bring to it shapes what it does through us. And when I say integrity, I don't mean politeness or reputation. I mean the deep, steady match between inside and outside. My thoughts, my motives, my words, my actions, lining up even when no one is watching. Integrity is not something extra or fancy. It is the safety lock on spiritual power. What do I mean by safety lock? Like the safety catch on a gun or a lid on a boiling pot. It keeps the force from running wild and hurting people. Without integrity, even sincere seekers can open the wrong doors and call in what they do not understand. With integrity, we can carry power safely and use it to heal and lift, not to harm. Spiritual energies need our bodies, our minds, our faculties to manifest and act in this world. It is about awareness, watching the currents and keeping the vessel we live in, our mind, heart, and body, keeping it steady and clean so spirit can flow without distortion. But let us be clear. These currents are not only dramatic forces that show up in ritual spaces, they move in everyday life as well. We know because we have witnessed it. We have witnessed that spirit can come powerfully through a person in a controlled space through drums, chants, and ritual. And when I say currents, I also want to be clear. These forces are universal. The Yoruba gave them names and developed rituals to honor them, but they do not belong to the Yoruba alone. What the Yoruba hold personally are their ancestors and the particular rivers, hills, and groves of their land. But the Orisha themselves are not private property. They are the currents of nature and life that exist everywhere. By calling them currents, we remember that they flow through all creation, not only through one culture's story. That is also why I prefer the word currents here, to keep our eyes on their universal nature, not on personalities. Too often, Orisha are imagined like glorified people, when in truth, they are flowing intelligences of creation. And because these currents are universal, we cannot control their existence, only our response to them. Integrity is what decides whether they flow through us as healing or distortion. But we would be naive to think that these are the only kinds of manifestations. Vices and virtues, desires and emotions are also currents. They too must express through human beings in order to act in this world. Anger, jealousy, compassion, courage. These are not just private feelings, they are energetic states that move through us, shape our behavior, and sometimes even alter how we look and move. If we limit spirituality only to sacred trance and possession, we miss half the picture. The everyday ways that energies pass through us in moods, attitudes, and character are just as real and just as revealing of what current we are aligned with. And this is exactly why integrity matters. Because whether it is an orisha in possession or an emotion in daily life, the current is colored by the state of the vessel it moves through. All of us here know, whether we name it or not, we know that spirit is what animates life. It is the breath behind every action, the force that propels everything from the unseen into the seen. When spirit leaves a body, it decays. When spirit flows, it moves thoughts, words, and deeds. Sometimes that flow is subtle. Sometimes, as in ritual, it is dramatic and visible. We also need to address a misunderstanding that creeps in again and again. The belief that dramatic manifestation makes someone superior. That if spirit shows up visibly through someone, it means they are more special, more chosen, more deserving, somehow set above others. At first, it might seem harmless, but this misunderstanding breeds entitlement, pride, and eventually abuse. Yes, the event itself can be spectacular, but the spectacle belongs to spirit, not to the person. The host is not automatically greater. They are simply the vessel at the moment. That vessel may be strong or it may be porous. What matters is how they live before and after, how they care for the current moving through them, and whether they distort it with ego, greed, or hidden wounds. You know, those unhealed places inside us, like resentment, shame, or old hurts that leak into the message, even when we don't intend them to. And we must be honest. How the host of spiritual messages acts in their private life inevitably influences how the public receives the message. Can we really separate the vessel from the current? Perhaps in theory, yes. Spirit is pure even if the vessel is flawed. But in practice, people cannot always make that distinction. The private character of the messenger colors the trust in the message. This is not to demand perfection. None of us are spotless. But it is to underline why integrity matters both inside and outside. Without it, even a true word can be doubted and the current itself dismissed. And here is why it matters. When we confuse spectacle with superiority, we stop discerning fruit. We stop asking, does this current heal or harm, clarify or confuse, uplift or manipulate? That is when money, status, and fame begin to pull us further from what we are really dealing with. And what are we really dealing with? Immense forces that require humility and care. This same distortion shows up in society. We act as though doctors or lawyers are more important than, say, teachers or farmers. Yet without the teacher, no doctor would read. Without the farmer, no lawyer would eat. Every role sustains the whole. In the same way, every spiritual gift has its place. None is superior. All are interdependent. To claim otherwise is not maturity, but misunderstanding. And here's another confusion worth naming. Material wealth and the spiritual wealth are not the same. They do not look the same. They do not grow the same way. And they do not feed the same hunger. When we use spiritual gifts to chase material wealth, we risk betraying the very gifts we were entrusted with. Instead of being stewards of a sacred current, we turn ourselves into traders of it, hawkers. And in doing so, we impoverish both the tradition and ourselves. And while we are here, we must name something uncomfortable but necessary. There are those who initiate others or hand out fragments of sacred paths without giving the cultural grounding or full understanding that makes the journey whole. Sometimes this is carelessness. Sometimes it is strategy. Either way, it creates dependency. And that is not Spirit's way. When people are given just enough to follow, but not enough to stand, they can never fully walk their path. They are left chasing a light they cannot reach. That is not initiation. That is withholding. And withholding wisdom while claiming to open the gate is not integrity. It is manipulation. And let us be honest, some who call themselves teachers are not interested in empowering others. They are building empires. They are seeking followers, not equals. But real initiation does not bind people to a personality. It roots them in the source. Anything less is not fullness. It is control dressed up as teaching. And every time we allow this, the the gift itself is cheapened and the current becomes polluted. Most of the time, Spirit chooses the vessel, but our thoughts, words, and deeds shape what we become available for and how cleanly it comes through. Some of us find ourselves echoing the energy we constantly dwell on, like a sponge soaking up water and dripping it back out. Others are trained to work with energy and develop skill. Some are born with a gift, an inborn ability to communicate with the unseen. And sometimes an energy takes hold without an invitation, what we might call possession. I am not saying these people asked for it. The unseen world, like the seen world, has forces that can push their way in. Yet, even here, the state of our inner life, our habits, our beliefs, our integrity shapes how vulnerable or resilient we are. Every environment is a breeding ground. Each one tunes the atmosphere, and the people within it become vessels for whatever current is being amplified. All of life is a ritual field. Integrity is what determines whether the field grows weeds or bears fruit. Spirit is always the main actor. Our bodies, our voices, our gestures are just the instruments it plays through. The reason the world feels so upside down is because we confuse the instrument for the music. We give more importance to the vessel than to the current flowing through it. The flesh is a vehicle. Sacred, yes, but not ultimate. A car is not the road, and a drum is not the rhythm. Without spirit, the body collapses. Without integrity, the current distorts. To glorify the vessel while ignoring the source is to live in illusion. This is why integrity matters so deeply. It reminds us that we are stewards, not owners. Gifts are given for service, not for self-exaltation. Integrity grounds us in humility, so that what flows through us uplifts instead of corrupts. And here is the deeper truth. Integrity is not only protection for the seeker, it is protection for the gift itself. Without integrity, even a genuine current can be warped as it passes through us. With integrity, the current arrives clear. With integrity, it comes through as life-giving. With integrity, it aligns with its source. We also have to be honest about this. We cannot always know with certainty what life force another person is drawing on. People can be deceived. We can be deceived. We are many light years away from purity. So our work is not to police everyone else, but to cultivate discernment, to watch the fruit of an energy rather than the appearance of it. If an energy consistently produces healing, clarity, humility, compassion, and courage, it is a sign of a higher current. If it produces harm, manipulation, fear, pride, or chaos, it is a sign of a lower one. Distortions exist. We live inside a tug of war of currents. Every day we are offered invitations from both sides. That is why the heart of integrity is not judging who is pure, but deciding what you will feed, which current you will strengthen through your own thoughts, words, deeds, and alliances. And this is not about being naive. Clean currents build things that last. They heal, clarify, unite, and leave room for growth. Dirty currents may seem powerful in the moment, but they corrode trust. They harm communities and eventually collapse on the one who sent them. One lifts life, the other drains it. This is why our elders insisted on character. Not to take our power, but to keep it from destroying us and those around us. As above, so below. Just as you wouldn't hand a loaded weapon to a child, you shouldn't handle spiritual power without care. Once you know what you are holding, you are responsible for how you hold it. That is why integrity is not optional, but essential. And let me be clear, spiritual power is at work in every life. Sometimes it shows up only as our longings and thoughts. Sometimes it moves through greater unseen forces. Either way, it is present whether or not we call it spirituality. This is why we cannot talk about how power shows up in our lives, the everyday ways of our thoughts, words, and habits bring things into form. So we cannot really bring it up without also talking about our desires, our vices, our virtues, and our beliefs. These are the levers that shape what kind of current we carry. And this is what I mean by spiritual maturity. Not titles or powers, but the willingness to examine your own motives and to choose with conscience. Even great ability means little without moral grounding. There is another inner lever we rarely name: hubris. In plain words, hubris is pride that has lost its humility, an inflated sense of power or importance. It is the voice inside that says, I cannot be touched. I can handle anything. I am above the rules. Hubris is especially dangerous with spiritual power because it blinds us to our own shadows. It makes us believe our motives are pure when they are not. It tells us that our gift excuses our behavior. But no gift, no title, no ritual puts us above the laws of cause and effect. That is why humility is not weakness, it is protection. Humility keeps the vessel clean. Integrity keeps the doors safe. Together, they let power flow without distortion. It is easy to talk about integrity as something teachers and leaders must have. And they must. But integrity is not one-sided. Seekers also have a responsibility to discern, to ask questions, to do their inner work, to remember that fascination is not devotion and the spectacle is not substance. If we hand over our discernment to anyone who dazzles us, we are not victims alone. We are participants in our own deception. Real seeking involves courage. The courage to look beneath the glitter, to choose depth over glamour, alignment over belonging at any cost. Integrity is a two-way bridge. If it is missing on either side, the crossing will eventually collapse. And let me widen the lens. When I speak of these currents, I am not talking about fairy tales. We live in a universe built on push and pull, action and reaction. Physics tells us every force meets an equal and opposite force. Chemistry shows us that everything we touch is a mixture of elements. Combine them well and you get medicine. Combine them badly and you get poison. Spiritual life works the same way. We are not floating in a neutral mist. We are standing inside an ongoing interaction of higher and lower currents, building or breaking, light and shadow. Some call it spiritual war. Whether you use that language or not, the push and pull is real. Inside us too, we are a mixture. Habits, virtues, vices, desires, ploys. This is our inner chemistry. If we combine them carelessly, we create distortion. But if we combine them consciously, we create alignment. This is why we cannot claim spiritual adulthood while living on personal whims and fancies. Even those of us who love nature often harm it without thinking. We are careless with the earth and careless with our own energy. Ifa itself is rooted in reverence for nature. Its orisha are drawn from rivers, forests, winds, earth. Yet we, its practitioners and descendants, sometimes forget that connection and treat nature as a backdrop instead of a living partner. Integrity begins with remembering that the currents we call on come from the same earth we walk on, and our treatment of it reflects the state of our own inner life. Across wisdom traditions, the teaching is consistent. People are not fixed like a single mango tree, fated to bear only one kind of fruit. We are more like a yard or a field where many different trees can grow. Mango, lime, coconut, breadfruit. Some trees lean towards sweetness, others towards sharpness. Some bear plenty, others little. What grows strong depends on what we tend, what we water, and what we neglect. Ifa says it is our ori and our character that decide. Christianity says grace can redirect even the hardest heart. Buddhism says ignorance, not essence, is the root of harm. Hinduism says we are all a mix of qualities, and what dominates is what we feed. Hermetic wisdom says imbalance, not essence, is what we call evil. So no, we are not doomed to one nature, but we can neglect or feed destructive seeds until they take over the yard. And here is where integrity returns. Because integrity is what keeps us from justifying harm in the name of survival, or excusing cruelty as ambition. Integrity reminds us we are free to choose what current we strengthen, and that choice is what ripens into character. Sometimes harm isn't about a person thinking, I am evil. It is about short vision. When I am dead, I am done, so I may as well do as I please now. Or it is about lack of self-control, knowing something is harmful but lacking the discipline to stop. That is why all the great traditions emphasize practice, not just knowledge. Practice builds the muscles of character. Without it, even the best intentions slide back into old habits. With it, we gradually learn to choose what heals instead of what destroys. And here's another truth. It is hard to walk in integrity alone. Our human tendencies are already strong. Then add generations of domination, of being told we are less than, and it compounds the struggle. Some of us wear toughness as an armor. Some of us chase power because it feels like survival. Some of us give up because goodness seems out of fashion. But here is where community matters. Not to blame or shame, but to remind each other of the beauty of being whole. Integrity is not weakness. It is strength that does not need a mask. It is the glory of being upright when everyone else expects you to bend. We need to help one another remember that there's nothing naive about being good. There's nothing foolish about gentleness. These are not outdated values. They are the very things that make a person trustworthy to hold power. Without them, spirituality corrodes. With them, spirituality heals. And let me demystify something here. When Yoruba beliefs met missionary language, Eshu, the Orisha at the crossroads, was equated with the devil. But even within Yoruba culture, Eshu often becomes the one people blame when things go wrong. In truth, Eshu is not a troublemaker at all. He is the messenger who stands at the crossroads of choice and consequence. He doesn't force us. He reveals what is already in us. This, of course, is not the full length and breadth of who Eshu is. His roles are many and complex, but I highlight this aspect because it mirrors the point I am making about currents and integrity. What we send out is what returns. And remember this too. The Orisha are not possessions of one people. They are universal energies with Yoruba names. They are not ours to buy and sell. They are currents of nature woven into the fabric of the world. Let me give one concrete example from my own journey. Not to accuse, but to show the imbalance I am speaking of. When I went to reclaim my ancestral knowledge, a student in Nigeria could study for 2 years for 5,000 naira, which was roughly 35 US at the time. I, coming from the diaspora, was asked to pay 5,000 US per year, 10,000 US for the same 2 years. I paid 2,500 up front. When my arrangements at home fell through and I could not keep up with extra payments, I was told to leave. I was relieved, to tell the truth, because they were not delivering what was promised, and they knew it. I was duped. And all of the research and understanding I later put into my book came from outside what I paid for. It was not what was promised to me in exchange for money. I share this not to cast blame, but to shine a light on a pattern many of us have felt. The difference between being paid for your time and being paid for a gift that was freely given to our ancestors. In our eagerness to reconnect with our roots, we can become targets. And in our eagerness to teach and to earn from teaching, some also seize the chance to capitalize on the perceived wealth of the Westerner. This is exactly why integrity and gentle character are not soft words, but real safeguards for teachers as well as seekers. We need to ask ourselves some hard questions. Do we serve Olodumare, or do we expect Olodumare to serve us? What incites and propels us to get more, even at another's detriment? This lure can have us acting in underhanded ways, using as bait emotional ties, secrets of ancient law, or even new technologies, anything that promises supremacy. The Yoruba understand the power of command. Through words and actions, desires are met. But at a glance, it can appear that divine knowledge has become nothing more than a facilitator of selfish desire. When that happens, we are no longer acting as guardians of a sacred trust, but as overindulged children demanding everything and unprepared to give even good behavior. Iwa Pele, gentle, balanced character, is the foundation of Ifa. Without it, what is being practiced may carry the name Ifa, but it is not the heart of Ifa. I must also admit that I came with the old Western thinking that anyone connected with spirituality was good. And worse than that, I didn't expect that people would try to sell their spirituality. In that context, I was very naive. Living 4 years among the Yoruba is where I truly grew up spiritually. At home, I could have been fooled into thinking that only a few rogue spiritual leaders existed. But that was partly because the traditions I knew were mostly written and codified, while Ifa is oral and relational, and therefore more easily turned into a personal commodity when integrity is lacking. That experience taught me the difference between titles and true character and why integrity must anchor power. It is also why I took careful notes throughout my time there and turned them into a rough guide so that others could be more aware. And even if they could not spend 4 years of their lives immersed as I did, they could still approach this wisdom with open eyes and steadier footing. But who am I to approve or disapprove? Casting blame is counterproductive. I speak as one who has been accused of being too Christian and not understanding. Yet I have lived, traveled, studied, and poured heart and resources into this path. I came with the Western assumption that anyone dealing with the sacred would at least not be blatantly trying to squeeze every last cent out of you. Ifa is not the only African spirituality, and like every human system, it carries both light and shadow. My point is not to accuse, but to acknowledge how easy it is for a seeker to arrive unprepared and be shaped or misled by whatever currents they meet. And when exploitation meets spiritual hunger, it does not only harm the seeker, it damages the tradition itself, eroding trust until only those with questionable motives of their own are drawn to it. That is the opposite of what our ancestors meant these paths to be. Even within Ifa, there is no ambiguity about this. Iwori Meiji teaches that all rituals, all sacrifices, all prayers are nothing without Iwa. Good, balanced character. It is Iwa that sustains a person in the world. And Ogbe Iwori warns us that when rituals and words are used for selfish purposes, the very forces we manipulate will one day turn back on us. These Odu are not abstract verses. They are living reminders that power without character collapses, and character without humility becomes rigidity. They call us back to Iwa Pwele, gentle, balanced behavior, as the foundation on which all spiritual work must rest. This is why integrity is not a nice word in a dictionary, but a daily guard on our gates. It is how we decide which energies we welcome and which we refuse. Without it, we become open doors for whatever is knocking. With it, We become safe vessels for what uplifts. And let us not pretend the currents do not keep score. The forces we work with are not swayed by applause. They do not care about titles, popularity, or how many followers you have. They return what is sent. Slowly sometimes, swiftly at others, but always. Integrity is not a suggestion. It is a safeguard built into the fabric of spiritual law. To misuse power may bring temporary shine, but it will always carry a price. Not as a punishment from an angry deity, but as consequence from a precise universe. But here is where we turn from exposing what is broken to imagining what can be healed. This is also an invitation to build differently. For too long, spiritual work has mirrored empire. A few at the top, many in awe below, and knowledge locked behind gates. But real spirituality was never meant to be an empire. It is an ecosystem. Rivers, roots, winds, mountains, each part feeding the other. Let us build our spaces like that, where power circulates, not concentrates, where seekers become carriers, not consumers, where elders are keepers of flame, not gatekeepers of doors. If integrity becomes our shared foundation, we would not just expose distortions, we will make them obsolete. So my invitation is simple. None of us can rewrite the past, but each of us can decide what current we carry and how. We do not have to be perfect. We do have to be awake. We do not have to know every mystery. We do have to be honest with ourselves. If we choose integrity, if we keep humility and gentle character as our foundation, we become safe vessels for power. We become channels for healing instead of distortion. Channels for wisdom instead of manipulation. This is what it means to grow from being children playing with fire into trustworthy adults of spirit. My prayer is that each of us leaves here with a renewed desire to watch our motives, tend our inner life, and add our weight to what heals. May what we touch, speak, and carry lift the world, not harm it. May we become living examples of Iwa Puele, gentle, balanced character, so that the powers we handle are not just powerful, but life-giving currents that heal, uplift, and sustain rather than harm, manipulate, or erode.